Hello and welcome to Decomposing Worm, a worm analysis podcast. That's Clarence. He's the first-time reader and literary expert.
And that was Matias. He's read the story before.
In this 12-episode series, we're using critical theory to explore the superhero web serial Worm from a high-level perspective, covering Worm in 6 300,000-ish word chunks.
And today is part 2 of Book 3, Perspectives. So here we'll be applying the literary theories to Worm, kind of combing through arcs 15 through 17 with the lens of a couple of theorists' theories, and we'll kind of go into how we're using them, how we're kind of, sticking everything together later on.
So, of course, if you haven't read arcs 15 through 17 yet, please do. This is a full spoilers discussion. And, of course, you should probably listen to the last episode as well, because we'll probably be referring back to what we talked about there.
Yes.
Okay, so first we're going to go do our character studies. I'm going to be talking about Marquis, and again, I'm sticking to waffling between Marquis and Marquis as I please. And Clarence, who are you doing for your character study?
I went a slightly different tact. I'll be looking at Regent and Skitter in their kind of like dynamic.
Yes, and then we'll be going through our essays and the theories that we'll be talking about. I'm focusing on Gramsci and the notions of dominance and hegemony. And Clarence is...
I will be looking at the sublime, but I kind of work my way there with some new criticism and then a little bit of like kind of situating that in the contemporary definition of like literature and the canon and everything.
And then we'll finish off at the very end, and of course between everything we'll have our little bits just to space out the very long what do you call those? Not diatribes. Diatribes are always hostile. What's the word for just...
Are diatribes always hostile? Is it the tribe bit of it?
Probably, because the dia is probably just talk, right?
Yeah. Because the dialogue. I mean, it's not monologue, right? Because we are
I guess
speaking
just a
back.
dialogue. Well, regardless, let's start with our character studies. All right, so I'll start off. As I said, I'm covering Marquis, and I have a couple of things to talk here to talk about here. So just to start off with summarizing him. Marquis is described as this handsome man with a sort of intentionally disheveled look, and that intentional dishevelment is kind of his entire persona. He's intentionally casual, intentionally informally formal, and he has this history of being actually a pretty terrible villain, like killing a lot of people, but having very strict rules about who he kills. He doesn't kill women or children. In fact, his rules are so strong that they withstood Jack testing him, and he didn't break the rule even with Jack. So that's kind of a testament to just how strong his convictions are.
Yeah.
That said, he can be very brutal, and we see him kind of using a lot of pretty like messy and I don't know if messy is the right word. Not dirty tactics either, but like they feel wrong.
Yeah, they're very like, manipulative. I would say. But
He's very but also like just painful. Like I'm talking about the fight against that very last fight of his career before the Brockton Bay Brigade captures him, right, with in Carol's interlude. There's that part where when they first start fighting him, right, I want to point out also, while we're describing his character, how much of just a classic supervillain he is. Like he is the perfect suave supervillain, I wish we get more of him in his prime, where he's in a black silk bathrobe next to his leather armchair, reaching for his wine in his mansion.
It's just such an image.
It's wonderful. I picture him at the end of like a staircase or whatever, even though that's probably not realistic. Anyway, it's just, but he's also like quipping as well in the supervillain way. When he breaks Manpower's foot, I believe, or maybe it might be Flashbangs. I'm not sure. But he goes, "Oh, broke your foot. How clumsy!" When he's the one that did it, and it's it's
very
anyway,
smooth.
Yes, I love that. But so the point I was getting to is when they first started attacking him, his first move is to turn himself into a pincushion, basically, with these needle-thin spikes of bone, which is just a very kind of unsettling image to picture.
Yeah.
Also, that bathrobe is punctured many times now. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if he's fighting naked.
He probably has just like this whole closet full of bathrobes just prepared.
Yes. Well, I wonder, it's not described in the text, but I wonder if he, makes bone armor or something, because that would make sense. Kaiser did that, so.
Because it's his bones, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it even more unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's like he's fighting with his body.
Yes.
But not, I don't know, bone should be within people's bodies,
Yeah, well, and the thing that makes it even more horrible is that he also manipulates other people's bones. And I think that's like his casual use, as soon as bone is exposed, right, with Manpower, he reshapes it. It says he's limited to reshaping, but goddamn, that's bad enough as is. The bone is the most permanent, I guess, organ. It's not the right term, but organ in the body, right?
You're kind of stuck if you don't have them.
Yeah.
Very floppy.
Yeah. I mean, even your organs can, your wet organs can heal, but bones, if they're shaped wrong, they have to be broken again to heal the correct way, which is interesting. Anyway, so the point I was getting to with his tactics, right, is once there's splinters of bone everywhere, he turns all of them into these basically spiked caltrops, right, with needle-thin spikes, and Carol thinks about how stepping on them can pierce through her boot, right? And it's almost like such a, I don't want to call it petty, but it's not like a grand, later on he's fighting with a scythe made of bone, right? And that's I don't know, it seems more superficially honorable than covering the ground in small spikes that make you bleed a lot when you step on them, right?
It's kind of underhanded tactics.
Yeah. And there's a part, of course, where a skull behind Carol basically puts a bone blindfold over her.
Oh, yeah.
Other things like that.
That was a very cool moment in that fight scene.
I could picture it too. It just looks kind of wrong.
Yeah.
So he fights in these this variety of performance and also using every single advantage he can at the same time, which I find it's just an interesting juxtaposition how he cultivates an image of himself as the formal and classic and
you'd think that there's specific rules of engagement when you're kind of interacting with his enemies, nemesis.
Nemesis, yeah. But his only real rules is the not killing women or children thing. Yeah. Everything else, because kind of whatever.
Yeah, he kind of establishes himself as a rules man, which I feel like gives him the opportunity to kind of exploit that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's interesting that he doesn't he doesn't break his rules to his advantage, which I think is interesting. I think he kind of in the section that we see him with in the birdcage with Amelia, he kind of places himself in a vulnerable position in order to manipulate his daughter into getting better, which is such a convoluted passageway of logic where it becomes very difficult to ascertain whether something is good or not. So I want to pull out a quote, which is basically one of his first quotes of his interlude, and I think it basically, I really like it when Wildbow does this. A character says what at the very least they think they are. So he says, "My girl, I'm not a good man. I have rules I follow, but that doesn't make me good. At best, it's one virtue among many I've failed to acquire. I'm rough around the edges, whatever I might play at, and that's plain enough to see to anyone who pays attention. I grew up in hard circumstances, and it's taken me a long time to work past that and earn the respect I get. And I would give that up if you needed it. You don't know me. You're family, Amelia. So, this is the other main notion of Marquis. There's basically there's basically three main facets to his character to look at in these sections that we see.
Yeah.
His rules, the way that he always keeps a complete control over his external emotions, and his attachment to a family and Amelia in the specific.
I guess he's very like Machiavellian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In that sense. Yeah, I didn't really think about it quite as much before, but he sort of like fits into that.
Yeah. In his Birdcage interlude, he focuses a lot on power and maintaining power. And while he does have, an external desire in Amelia, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later, he does. That is his main focus, but his secondary focus, which is almost as important, is just maintaining power and even, using every means at his disposal, including his own daughter, to maintain that. But also the power is not, like, I don't know what he wants to do with it other than maintain power, right? His cell block is apparently pretty peaceful, right? That's the intention. Yeah. And yeah, he has that very Machiavellian train of thought of inciting rebellion just so he can put it down, right?
Yeah. And kind of like the controlled, exterior and that sort of thing, and like not really trusting who he has around him. Yeah. A bit of a tangent before we get into that second point of him controlling his emotions all the time. I find it very interesting that in the Birdcage, everyone uses their cape names, even though none of them are costumed. Yeah, because they're all like in the same outfits, aren't they? Yeah, they're all in prison outfits, maybe mildly customized. Yeah. Maybe there's a few that like have a power that gives them essentially a costume, right? But other than that, they see each other's faces, and yet they always refer to each other in the context of parahumans. Well, I assume because it's like they've entered that space because of what they have done in the parahuman, like in their kind of caped lives, and it's like one thing that gives them control over themselves is using those names. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's an identity that they get to decide. Yeah, because they're already sort of like living this life of like material attrition, living in the Birdcage. So I think any kind of ability to exact and kind of like take over some sort of power of themselves, I think. Also, they all like know each other by those names, So it's kind of like a Well, I find your point interesting about the control over themselves. I think they go into the Birdcage, right, and lose every other external identifying factor of themselves except for their power and their name, right? They're wearing all the same clothes. They live in similar places. All the cells are the same, and so. Yeah, the only identifying factor is their power, and so I think naturally they would pick the name that corresponds to that power, rather than, whatever the unique name from birth is. Yeah, well, because their civilian identity has become irrelevant at this point. That's true. Because their full identity of their daily lived experience is themselves with their power in a community that is solely people, like solely other parahumans, Yeah. Yeah. Additionally, just another complicating factor is that Marquis does call Amelia rather than Panacea. That's true. And I think probably in the Birdcage, their civilian names, their birth names, are probably very often used in that private language, right? Only for close friends or like lovers and stuff like that. Which I think it's interesting that it's kind of a reversal where the cape persona becomes the public and the civilian
becomes the private. Well, I guess it always was that, but even more so now.
Yeah, but even more so.
Where I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the K persona becomes the public, the identity of which they interact with the public, and the civilian is only for is almost like an alter ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They've kind of like had that switch.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the end of that tangent. It went a little bit longer than I
Sorry,
but so his other Marquis' other main thing is this control over his exterior, this complete control over how other people will see him.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that one point when he talks about using his power, right? When he snaps the bone, it says there is mind-shattering pain for a moment before it fades, which is just rather intense.
That's a lot to take,
And he does it seemingly constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no sign that anyone knows about the amount of pain he gets. There's not a point where someone says, oh, he doesn't feel, the pain of his bones breaking.
Yeah.
But there's never a point where they're like, that's gotta hurt or something like that.
He's like built his entire persona against of not being able, like not showing any weakness at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of like, that's so much.
Yeah, and so that extends into every other part of his personality as well. Anytime he feels surprised, he suppresses it. Anytime he's concerned, he suppresses it. Anytime he doesn't know how other people should, how he should be reacting to other people, he suppresses it and just gives a rote tactic, right? He just smiles and says nothing.
Yeah, I remember us chatting about that. It's. I feel like it's kind of a powder keg, waiting to burst. Actually, powder kegs don't burst. They explode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I don't know. It seems he needs some sort of outlet to kind of manage this. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder where all that reaction to the mind-shattering pain goes. I mean, maybe that's why he murders people. So.
You gotta find catharsis. You gotta find catharsis somewhere.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Well, that leads me into my next point. Well, I guess the final thought I want to, say is that because of how he controls this expression and cultivates his persona, while internally, we see that there's actually, multiple conflicts and things like that going on internally, externally, he always kinds of seems exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a point where he seems exceptionally, happy or angry, or, maybe during the Brockton Bay Brigade fight, he's like a little bit more serious, but otherwise he's always the same.
Yeah.
So the final section I want to talk about is family and his relationship to Amelia, which is interesting in that he's both being pragmatic and practical about, but also is almost, I don't want to say irrationally, but his devotion to her is not just out of logic, I think.
No, I don't think so at all.
There's a quote. Let me just read a couple sections where he's talking about Amelia, and this is coming from his interlude, and then I'll say a quote from Carol's interlude. If he was able to buy enough time, verify that she was beyond saving, then he could return her to the women's cell blocks, cut his losses, and take the resulting hit to his reputation as the only real cost of trying. He didn't want to take either of those options. He had so few memories with her from when she'd been a toddler, but they'd stayed with him. So, and then he goes through some of his, real feeling memories of being with her, including more than once as he prepared tea to share with Lung during one of their long discussions. He thought of the mock tea party he'd had with his daughter. And then these moments seemed further away now than they had in the days before he'd been reunited with her. He would never recapture them, he knew, but maybe he could find other, new memories to share with her. A deep conversation, a father's pride at her accomplishments. And then the quote I want to pull from Carol's interlude is, "Her mother's gone, I'm afraid, the big C. Amelia and I were introduced shortly after that. About a year ago, now that I think on it. I must admit, I've enjoyed our time together more than I've enjoyed all my crimes combined. Quite surprising. So, I think, basically, at least my headcanon, kind of understanding of this is, when we see him, right, at this mansion, he's won as a supervillain, right? He has the mansion. He could defeat all of these heroes if, he were willing to abandon his daughter.
Yeah.
He has, control over his gang. He's obviously, filthy rich. Like, he has everything he could basically desire, except for maybe more security, more, stability, more ensuring that this is going to last forever. But after, being with his daughter for a year, I think he's, finally found something that he actually really cares about, really enjoys, and really wants to try and be good for.
Parenthood definitely seems to have changed him.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Even if he's still very violent murderer.
That's true. That's true. Like his actions that he has taken, as his like violent murdery self, I think kind of sit at a different place in his mind than what he does with his daughter. And I don't know, he has like a deep sentimentality with her.
Yeah, and so there's this one part where she brings up a family near the end of his interlude. She says, "You said before that family was the most important thing." Something like that. Would you understand if I said I didn't consider you family? I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to talk to you, but Victoria was my family. And then from him, I understand, yes. Expertise let him mask the pain her words caused him. I abandoned you to them because I was too proud to stop being the Marquis of Brockton Bay. I should understand that you grew more attached to them than to me. Yet I can't. So I think this moment is really important to kind of synthesize kind of the things we've been talking about.
Yeah. It's very painful.
Yeah, and he's hiding his pain from her. And I mean, I don't want to say that, he should, because I don't know if like logically that would be the best. I don't want to say that he shouldn't, because I don't know if that would actually, make her like him more or anything. But, that's a choice he's making. And I don't know. I mean, she doesn't believe him when he says that he would kind of give everything up for her in the birdcage, which, I don't know if that's entirely true, because then he would probably die, but he's risking everything for her. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like he is afraid to articulate everything and kind of display how he feels completely, because he doesn't want to like fully experience that situation, I guess. Where he can, I feel like he can sort of temper his pain when he isn't showing it to her, because then it's just his to deal with, instead of kind of showing to her that he was expecting and hoping for more. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing with all of his lieutenants and all his other, more political things, is that showing his true feelings is kind of a weakness, or at least he feels that it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I almost think that it almost would be correct here too, because, well, maybe not, but there's a chance that she would think it's weird or something like that, and like him less because he's so attached to her or something. Then again, he was her father, so like,
that's very true.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is that line in that section. I abandoned you to them because I was too proud to stop being the Marquis of Brockton Bay. I should understand that you grew more attached to them than to me, yet I can't. So particularly that first section, because I was too proud to stop being the Marquis of Brockton Bay. I don't know exactly how to parse that, because he did, end up he ended up not being the Marquis of Brockton Bay anymore. He stopped being in the sense of the ruling sense, but of course he continued to be in the sort of legendary sense.
Yeah, and I think that's what he was, speaking about. Is that sort of legendary sense of like, if he was to sort of give up what he was doing and kind of step away from that in order to care for her, materially, and become a father who like takes her to preschool and, buys fancy things and, like she goes to like Target, I feel like the person that he has cultivated would not do that, like the reputation that he has built around himself. I think that was kind of what it was. He was like, I know how to deal, like I have built myself into this person and I don't want to let go of that.
So the way you're parsing it is that it's more referring to his actions before that final fight.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, yeah. And at the same time, if we're talking about that final fight and his loss there in particular, he could have just like taken her and run. I think he definitely could have, right? Because he was able to burrow.
That's the choice, I think, that he had made.
Yeah. He chose to try to fight them off instead of just cutting his losses and running away, but losing a ton of reputation for running away with his daughter.
Yes, yeah. So it was either run away with the daughter or acknowledge and keep the name and keep the reputation, which he kind of had to compromise, I think. And then like later, I think he became in the birdcage, when he's like imagining all of this, I think, where he's like imagining the mock tea party and everything, that it seems like he greatly regrets that particular action. Maybe not everything that came along with it, but definitely that particular action. Yeah.
The final thing I want to, I forgot to mention it earlier, is he says that he's only ever lost one fight, and that's the fight that sent him to the birdcage. He says he only lost the one fight and there were extenuating circumstances. And the extenuating circumstances, of course, were Amelia. And I think that's very interesting. The other extension of that is, he's thinking about provoking a mutiny, and he's super assured that he's going to win without question. But also,
he's the one setting it up.
In this case, Amelia is also there. Right?
Yeah.
He says, "Of course I'm going to win. I've only ever lost once, and there were extenuating circumstances, i.e., my daughter was there, and then his daughter is here too." So
she is. Yeah, I think. I don't know, because his relationship, like his conceptualization, I think, of family and particularly Amelia, she seems like his kind of like, Achilles heel sort of thing. Where he has this kind of like carefully created, husk of himself. And then she's kind of like the one that can like chip away at that.
Yeah. Unwittingly too. I don't think she's trying to.
Yeah, she's totally unaware of how much power she has right now.
Yeah.
So she's just kind of like mired in her own deal.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty big deal. So
That's true.
Okay, well, that's what I have about Marquis.
Yeah.
The Marquis of Brockton Bay. So, if you have any other, if you guys listening have any thoughts on Marquis that you wanna give to me, or you want to yell at me for switching between the two names, or offer an alternative third or fourth way to pronounce his name, you can send us an email at decomposingpod@gmail.com. So please do that.
Yes. Share your thoughts.
All right, let's get into your character study, Clarence.
Right. My character's study, this particular section, I think, between Taylor and Alec, and in my head, I kind of think of them as Taylor and Regent, so I will probably stick with that throughout this whole kind of, look, I suppose. But they have a peculiar dynamic that I think is like they have strangely the ability to understand each other, but it's not. They don't. It's like not quite like they understand each other in like a I've read a case study and this seems to make sense to me sort of way. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I've like fully articulated it, but I was thinking particularly in comparison to others, the way that they kind of interact is because they're not like open and easy friends, kind of like the way that Taylor and Lisa are. The way that they have become, where they can kind of like share the information, and they have maybe some things that they don't tell each other, but it seems relatively easy. And then like with Rachel, it's very much Taylor working at it very much, like working at it, very deliberately and determinedly. It seems like that dynamic is like a little bit the way that Regent, kind of approaches Taylor. Is that I mean, it's not that he like studies her behavior and decides this is how I'm going to like befriend her, but it's very much of he kind of pokes at her to like make her, you know, think through what she's doing and kind of examine the underlying reasons in a way that a lot of other people wouldn't. Like with Brian, he just kind of says it out loud and is like, this is what I think, and you know, this is what's happening. And she obviously gets mad anytime there's that sort of confrontation. But with Regent, there's he kind of couches it enough in teasing and conversation and kind of this like back and forth that I think it makes her, or when he's oppositional, he you know, kind of lays it bare for her to see and examine for herself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In her perspective, he's always immature,
yes.
and
she thinks of him
like
as very and something to be, you know, kind of controlled or like hindered.
Corralled, maybe.
Yeah, corralled.
Yeah.
That's the term.
Yeah.
They slightly confound each other, I think, but they provide clarity in each other's actions. I think with her, she kind of unknowingly, you know, kind of works on Regent to make him like reevaluate himself. And a lot of the time, I think with her, she's bringing in, you know, intentionality to all of her actions that he doesn't really have. And I think by doing so, because he is like within the group by proxy, she kind of like asks him to reevaluate why he's doing what he is doing and kind of, you know, how he fits into the group and what his role is.
So you're talking about that in the more moral sense, or in just a normal like acting, like in as a member of the group dynamic?
It's a little bit of both. If we look at specifically, like if we look at the way that Regent kind of thinks about what they're doing, they like when she has him kind of like rethink the whole dynamic, like with Coil, where she approaches everybody and is like, hey, so I've already discussed this a little bit, but then here we are. I want to discuss this. I want to, you know, take down Coil. I want to get Dinah. And he's kind of, you know, kind of mealy-mouthed about it. Because to him, he's kind of just in this sort of like chaotic, sort of not really evil, but like maybe a bit amoral fun. Like he's kind of just there along for the ride. And so like in the very beginning in arc 15, in the first chapter of that, he was like, it was fun. That was why we got into this, wasn't it? Easy money, fun, get to do what we wanted, no pressure, no responsibilities. It's become something else. So maybe we end that, you know? And then she's kind of like, she butts in, she's kind of like, well, I'm not really talking about taking Coilhead on yet. I do want to preserve my territory, all of this, it's helping people. And then so he's like, so what do you want? You know, he's always the one who's kind of like pushing. He's always like... Yeah,
it's... I think what you said earlier about him, I mean, your main point of him articulating, or making Taylor articulate her feelings on things, that's especially emblematic in that scene. And when he basically like acts difficult, right, and says like, why do you want this, you know, this is so much extra work, etc. But he is, even when he's saying that, he's already decided that he's going to go along with it.
He does a lot of where he just needles her along to make her articulate in a different way than she has, so that I think by doing this, he kind of like breaks down her rationalization in a way that other people can't.
Yeah. The other example, and we talked about it on the overview, was, and I stole it from We've Got Worm, is when she's mad about controlling...
yes.
What's his name?
When she's mad about controlling Victor.
Yeah, Victor. And he's the one that actually gets at what is the real reason you're upset about this.
He goes, let's call a duck a duck. You know, you agreed to capture Shadowstalker because, you know, you got revenge, and then later on he's like, you know, sure, that's fine, whatever, because she's like kind of, you know, trying to like work her way around it. She's like, oh, you know, all of this. And then he's like, but let's be honest about all of this. Like, you spend a lot of time saying one thing, doing another, you know, where he kind of like is very clearly, you know, quick to point it out. But he doesn't, I mean, maybe it does seem, you know, confrontational at the moment, but he doesn't, I don't know how to articulate the difference between the way that he confronts her with the way that like Brian confronts her about it.
Yeah.
But some way that Regent does it makes it seem less hostile, I think.
Yeah, it's less steadfast. It's less it's a challenge, but it's not one that's actually like demanding that she change.
Yeah.
Right? Where Brian, he's like I'm thinking of the one in the aftermath of, his torture. Is you did wrong, you should feel bad about it, etc. And Regent's just like you're being dumb. And
I guess there's
don't
more like
it,
emotionally.
and I'm gonna go along with it, but like reevaluate why you're feeling this way because it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I guess their conversations are less emotionally charged, which I think perhaps that sort of like, a little bit of a step back, a little bit of like, acquaintanceship rather than like, very close friendship. I think that, kind of cools some of her like defensiveness, about, when she's kind of, justifying herself. And then he also, he very deliberately like, kind of makes it seem lighthearted, where he creates the tension, where he calls her out, or he'll articulate something and he's like, you need to think about this and why you did this specific thing, or like, why are we all acting this particular way or all of this, he plays devil's advocate just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
But then there'll be all these moments where he'll always use the kind of like familiar, like camaraderie sort of like, he always calls her dork, or like,
I love how Taylor just continually gets mad about that.
She's like, you're
it's
still
like
calling
the
me
most
that?
mild thing that he could do.
So he kind of like, he lets it become lighthearted.
Yeah.
Where after they fight, dragon suits, he's like off to go do whatever. So he's like, I'll be off too, and good work, chief. He does this like mock salute. Where he just kind of, and then to her that's like both a moment of like tension and then also like release. Cause it's him just kind of, like accepting her role in it and, kind of creating space for her to like relax after that kind of like, very tense moment of like the fight, this very like, one after another sort of thing. And then he kind of like creates the segue for the discussion of leadership and he does.
Yeah, I wonder if that was intentional.
I don't know. I can't tell with Regent.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I feel like he unconsciously has intentions.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know. To me, I also can't understand pure chaos.
I don't know if he's pure chaos.
No, I think he wants something to be interested in.
Yeah, because he only has emotions, so often. One thing I think is important to just take stock of is that he really does enjoy being part of the group. Like he could do anything else, especially post having a Shatterbird, right?
Yeah, I know he's kind of carting her around. He has all this, but he chooses to like continually keep interacting. There's multiple times where he like goes off to go hang out with Imp and this sort of which seems to bode ill, but I don't know. They both like I feel like they would be very like not tricky but I feel like they would
mischievous.
Yeah, mischievous. I feel like they could cause some very like Puck like scenario to occur. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so they have like a very interesting sort of almost unconscious dynamic because neither of them set out to do like they don't intentionally, cultivate a relationship. It just kind of like has occurred,
Yeah. I think part of it is being part of the out group of the group, but at the same time also because they have this kind of the same kind of attitude of, well, they're both bucking the authority of some of the undersiders.
That's true. Yeah. Oh wait, are you talking about Regent and Imp?
Oh yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, that makes more sense.
I thought you were talking about them as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, no,
Oh, okay.
they're an interesting pair. But the dynamic of Regent and Taylor, I think.
Right.
They have that sort of... Oh, yeah, no, those two were the ones that I was speaking about, of like where they kind of like didn't set out to have an acquaintanceship. Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like Imp and Regent did. Mm-hmm. But in like kind of a, what you were saying, this sort of like, we've been forgotten, so we will, kind of band together. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like Lisa would have a really good time with them if she didn't have two other serious people that she is trying to get the favor of even more.
Yeah, she seems like she would fit in well with that kind of.
Like she cares about Taylor and Brian's opinion too much to go off and joke with them, but I think she would love to.
Yeah.
She was a kleptomaniac before all this, right?
Yeah, she's kind of like been
basically something like that.
Stuck into like, an official position because of her power. But I feel like she would have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I find the dynamic at the very beginning of the story, before things get very serious, I think just as a snapshot of like what Taylor and Regent's like, relationship as an interaction could have been if things didn't get so incredibly chaotic and serious, where he's needling her, but not, I mean, it's very casual, there's not a lot at stake.
Yeah, it's not cool.
And it's for the most part anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Regent, but
yeah. I mean, like his cruelty is pretty limited to like real life, like friend cruelty. Like I don't know if that's exactly the right term, but like tripping someone so they fall kind of thing. Which of course is not okay with Taylor for very obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But
because she kind of,
and in a healthy dynamic of a friend group, it wouldn't be that bad.
I think that's that kind of ends up being the effect of his kind of, like the calling her dork, chief, all of this kind of, and then, kind of needling her in their discussions, that sort of thing. I think he's kind of like forging that normalcy into their friendship so that she like becomes accustomed to it. I mean, she still lets it, kind of set her off sometimes, but he intends to do that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. We've Got Worm pointed out to me that Taylor always gets defensive about stuff, even when they might just be jokes. The example that they talked about and it stuck in my mind was when she, in Arc 14, is going to feed Atlas bugs, and she mentions that she was thinking about feeding her people bugs, and Regent's like, ew, gross. How evil are you?
Yeah.
And it's like very obviously just a joke, and not, I mean, like it's almost the appropriate response to that kind of statement. But Taylor gets very immediately defensive about it, going, well, it's a good idea, it has all the nutrients and people around the world do it, and of course I would try it first. And it's like, Taylor, relax.
Yeah, it's kind of like she's spent all this time thinking, she's trying to think practically, and she's maybe it's been an idle thought, but like it seems like she'd done research and thought about it, and she's kind of like made these steps to kind of check things off, and then suddenly he's just kind of like, to her it seems like he's like pulling everything apart, and so she like, I don't know, she wants things to like, she wants her actions to be correct.
Yes, I think that's a good way to sum it up.
Yeah.
Of course, they only have to be correct by her own estimations.
Oh yeah,
so.
Very, very true. And he does that a lot, where he's like, he kind of like sets her in a different perspective, so that she has to think about it more. Yeah.
Yeah, like if she was actually planning to feed people bugs, I think he would be the one thinking, hey, he would be the one to put into her mind, hey, bugs are gross.
Yeah,
Make people understand that you're not just being gross.
Yeah. But yeah, that's about all that I have for them two currently. Yeah.
Of course, there is more relationship to come, I'm sure. Yeah. More interactions to complicate things.
Yeah, I assume so.
Okay, okay, so we're gonna have our one of our little interlude here. We're gonna talk about our favorite moments from the last 3 arcs, just for a little bit before we get into our explorations, our perspectives.
All right.
So, Clarence, please start off with yours because I forgot to write mine down and I need a second to think about it.
Yes. Okay. So, we didn't talk about it because it was really kind of just like this aside that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even really anything. It was just kind of Triumph, wandering around in the like radiation area or radiated zone or whatever, of Bakuru's poem, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That.
Yeah, the scar.
Yes.
Or a big section of.
Yeah. Does it have like a? I don't know.
Yeah, it does later on. But
okay.
it's I'm going to cut it so that people don't know I just spoiled that. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just what that section ends up being called because it's where all the bombs were dropped. Yeah, the section where everything, well, all the bombs were dropped during the Slaughterhouse 9 fight.
The radiation is like still present and presumably causing problems. But like Crawler and Mannequin are like are silicone statues, maybe? I don't know, but like they're silicone. And I think it's like it's maybe a paragraph, but it was such a stark image in my head of this kind of like almost this like terrible like after image monument type thing. That was just kind of like physically embedded into like the cityscape.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's like a very small thing to change or like to leave behind, but just the fact that it's like still there and they're still there and I don't know. I mean, I really liked it. It's fascinating. Yeah.
I love the image in my head of Crawler, his arms splayed open, roaring at the sky.
Yeah.
You know, like that at the height of his hubris, essentially saying nothing can destroy me, hurt me so that I can become stronger. And then it actually does off him. Yeah. And then Mannequin trying to slink away and not being able to.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah. Is silicone the thing that people use when they 3D print?
No. That is.
Or is it that kind of like
something
rubbery
called
stuff?
PLA. It's a particular plastic material. No, silicon is the main material used for computer chips. I think it's kind of like glass.
Oh, okay.
It like not like as a physical property. I believe it's something like glass, but it also is used as a sort of not as plastic, but a material similar to plastic, I believe.
Okay.
I'm not a materials scientist. So if someone wants to email us a good explanation of what silicon is and its properties and stuff, like I can list examples of what it's used in, but I don't know its like intrinsic properties.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anyone wants to do that and school us, we would appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what was your favorite moment? Have you thought of one?
I have. I have a couple of little ones. The first one is, and we kind of already talked about it, but when Taylor's torturing Triumph, and there's that part where she's confronting the mayor, and particularly the section where he goes, he's my son, right? And it really, really affects Taylor emotionally, even if she's not completely aware of why and doesn't actually take it in and reevaluate her decisions really. Her eyes start tearing up and all she says is yeah, which is just like she can't muster a response as this mayor tries to kill her with a shotgun.
Yeah, that's a good moment. I mean, not good, like that's a notable,
well done moment.
Yeah, notable moment.
Yeah, this wasn't the one I was thinking of, but the first hero that they encounter when the travelers leave their apartment.
Ah, yes.
The one that blows himself up. It's very he's the bubble cape. That's his entire description. Yeah, and we kind of just see a snapshot of his entire career. Basically, I mean the end of his career.
His GI tract.
Yeah, and he is fighting the Sneemerg. He's being a true hero, and then gets impaled, and he's barely paying attention to these civilians. He's just like, get out of here, and then kind of pays them no mind as he's preoccupied with his intestines being pushed out of his stomach, and he's still thinking of escaping at that time, which is
how
yeah, he's still thinking of, if I could just get free, I can fly away. And Dragon says you won't get it in time. And the choice of whether or not to continue living is taken away from him.
Yeah.
The armband goes off. It starts beeping. But I just that moment, that implication of like, he knows that he's gonna die, so he places his wrist close to his head. That way it's instantaneous. Like, I don't know. I don't know exactly how to parse what I'm feeling there, but like, it's like a mixed sort of acceptance.
Yeah.
Wait, like, he doesn't want this to happen. He's mad at Dragon for doing it, but
he knows he must.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that, to me, is the best sort of tragic hero. Is the one that, like, knowingly faces death.
Yeah.
Not just has, like, the epiphany and is like, here are all the things I could have done better, and now I die, you know. Unexpected, you know, because somebody rolled up to the castle. But the ones who acknowledge that it is the end. They have done all that they could.
Yeah.
Man.
He doesn't leave a message to anyone.
Yeah. Presumably he probably left a message before he went out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe he didn't have anyone that was worth, like... Not that he didn't have anyone at home, but that he didn't have anyone worth... He chose to yell at Dragon instead of leaving a message. So no one that is worth more than expressing his final emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That is our favorite moments.
Yeah.
Let's get into our essays.
Yes. Okay. So I'm the first one. This one, okay, so you complained last time that we keep calling them essays. So I wrote essay exploration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. A beautiful
So fancy.
synthesis.
Yeah, so mine, it kind of like meanders a bit. So I apologize if it seems like we're kind of wandering around. But it
wouldn't be a podcast if it wasn't.
You know, there's at least like a thread, you know, that follows. So first we're going to kind of start with kind of resituating formalism, but then specifically like new criticism. Kind of this sort of into like contemporary use, right? So we'll kind of to remind
everyone. So basically, the invention of English and literary studies as a university like department, like it existed, but it kind of didn't have a specific purpose. Essentially,
yeah.
Was invented with these the American professors, which were called the New Critics, and they are the initial part of formalism, which is basically the notion of looking at the form of the text as the way to analyze it. And that's basically how most of us analyze text today.
Yeah. And it's specifically like looking at like the text by itself, like kind of, you know, because before formalism, like there was a lot of, you know, emphasis on like the historical and autobiographical and biographical pieces of the text, and a lot of like the kind of like, you know, couching of everything. And then the new critics, like specifically the one that I kind of like re-examined a bit was Cleanth Brooks, but there was, you know, everybody else too, where they decided that it should be logical. You know, this kind of, it's not biographical, it's not historical, it's not subjective. It needs to be like, you know, this objective study, you know, kind of to kind of modulate this like emotional first response, which I still cannot figure out who said that, but that was kind of like that was kind of like the prevailing thought, especially like because we're coming out of like Romanticism, all of that, is that the first response to a book, to a text, is emotional. And so the new critics were kind of like, we have made these ways to read as like, you know, kind of this modulating ability to kind of like, you know, kind of reinscribe logic onto the text, right?
So basically to feel, but to moderate that feeling interpretation of the text through a logical reading.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And then, I mean, later on, the like reader response theorists kind of like throw that out the window. They're like, no, we need to...
Yeah, where like the feeling is the most important part because that's the actual reaction you're getting. And also it's informed by society. Your feelings are informed by the society in which you live. Yeah.
So they were kind of focused on this kind of like interior life of the text. And in order to examine that, the necessity for that is for text to be stable, which, they needed it to be self-contained and self-referential, right? So that they can kind of like, examine it as objective instead of kind of bringing in everything else that kind of interacts with text. So they had to kind of naturalize the notion that text is stable, and they kind of extended that to the literary canon. So when you kind of step into this like close reading from like a contemporary standpoint, it becomes kind of difficult to kind of rectify, I think, our current understanding of the literary canon, because like we know it's unstable, like we know that it is like socially produced as the norm, right?
Yeah, there's no particular reason. I mean, Shakespeare is great, but there's not a specific reason why he's taught over another contemporary writer.
Yeah, it's that like
other than because we say that we need to.
Yeah, precisely. The values that are kind of embedded within those texts, within the literary canon, they've become naturalized, so that like it becomes a canon instead of just like a list of books.
Right.
But then we've like over the last half century, oh god, no, it's 20 years into the
the new century. Yep.
So goodness. So almost like 3/4 of a century later, we've kind of like poked holes in that. So I think approaching close reading and approaching formalism now, I think we have to take into account, we have to keep in mind that this is not necessarily like the full reality. You know what I mean? Because text, I mean, it's definitely fluid. Like we have all these adaptations, we have like particular moments in time, like the way that readers read it, kind of creates something almost new because they read it. There's just so many additional things that kind of, bleed into it and kind of unravel that.
Yeah. The way that a, contemporary of Shakespeare would read or, watch one of his plays and understand it and feel about it and grasp all the implications of is not only different from a contemporary person, but it's also different from like a professor now, right? Even one who has studied and is simulating themselves in the time, and then any normal reader is relating it to just the modern day and what's going on, right?
Yeah. Well, because
they might be more likely to analogize as like a character to the leader of a country or something.
Yeah. We kind of naturally turn to that kind of looking for those connections to the real world, I guess you could say. I don't know, but just to the situation at hand, I suppose you could say.
If you want to be Marxist about it, you say the material reality of the world.
Yes, no, that is exactly what I was searching for. Yeah, we want to tie it to material things, because literature kind of defamiliarizes these like the archetypes and like the values and that sort of thing from ordinary language, which that was like kind of their whole thing as well. That was one of the terms that the new critics came up with, was defamiliarization, where we kind of like take it out of the context.
Yeah, isn't the understanding something like I'm really hoping I'm not getting this mixed up with the post-structuralists, because that's what I've been reading now. But the notion that literature and poetry and things like that are everyday language made into this unfamiliar way. That way we can view it differently than we do in our everyday.
Yes.
Which is like, I mean, just to simplify it down, is that the way that literature is written and the way poetry is written is not how we talk. The only time that this particular style of language is used is in these sorts of texts, right? Like even if you're telling a story out loud, you don't tell it like you do literature for the most part anyway.
it's very like, there are definitely like particular ways that we kind of structure, literature and storytelling, I think, versus just like ordinary language. We use text differently. But that's a whole nother conversation about like,
yes.
Like the rhetorical use of, different things. But it's actually interesting though that the new critics kind of, tacked this onto them, the defamiliarization, because kind of a little bit of what they were speaking back against, of the emotional attachments in like romanticism, like was very reliant upon this sort of like marriage of like realistically, telling stories and then attaching to like imagination. Because I guess this is much earlier. This is like a 100 years or maybe 150 years previously, of like kind of the popularization of the novel. Like, I mean, now we think of it as like genre fiction, but the novel kind of like sat in that kind of social space, I guess you could say, of the novel, where it's reading for the masses.
Right. Not reading for...
Not like this, big fancy
It's not
highbrow,
classic, yeah.
know.
It's not Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
It's just a story about a guy who gets stuck on an island. Right.
Although I feel like compounding the situation of like the big fancy people who were kind of running the universities at the time, were a lot of like old white men, and a lot of people who were writing novels, and especially like Gothic novels, were like, I mean, it was like women writing by women, writing, for women, sort of thing. That was kind of like where it really like began until it like kind of expanded.
Right. Frankenstein. What's the Jane Eyre?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The Bronte sisters, Anne Radcliffe, that whole kind of crew. So it was deemed lowbrow, but really it was just misogynistic. Yeah. This kind of, designation. Yeah. Well, because it was kind of seeking to kind of like create an objective world, right? So create like the realistic world and then just kind of like placing subjectivity into it, kind of like bringing their own imagination.
Just to tie it to another term in case we use it again, this is that notion of realism is a very modernist notion of just throw off the traditional things in favor of what is real and essential. And that's where like stuff like stream of consciousness is important. But anyway.
Yes.
I'd say stream of consciousness because I was thinking of other writers and I thought of Virginia Woolf, and I was just trying to remember when she was, and she did stream of consciousness.
Yeah, she was kind of the 1920s, I think.
Yeah, she's another one of these.
It's what sits in my head.
Women writers.
Yeah. Yeah, so the formalism was kind of, it like wanted to kind of, I mean, it bred out of, what we discussed of like kind of wanted to kind of codify what they're doing and like establishing the field and everything like that, and kind of wanting to create this very like objective way to study literature, but at the same time
turning it into a science.
Turning it into a science, but it was kind of like back in it was like dualistic in its purpose of like, it was speaking against the kind of literature appreciation and this like very emotionally reliant, kind of romantic way to read. And then also kind of, it had the kind of, institutional reasons. So I'll kind of like be sitting in between that, because I want to talk about the sublime. So it'll be kind of like a variation on the theme of formalism, because the sublime is very, it has a very, traceable kind of genealogy, I think, that I think kind of gives all of the kind of context and background for us to kind of like look at it within Worm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think it speaks kind of to both the way that Walbo kind of writes horror and kind of the like experiential aspects.
Yeah.
Of the kind of, beyond. It's not like supernatural, you would say. Do you think? I don't know what particular.
Which aspect are you talking about?
Of like the Endbringers and Nilbong and everybody.
Nilbog?
Yes. I don't know why. I don't know why I added an extra N.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they are supernatural. They are.
Would you assign that supernatural as the adjective?
Well, that's interesting of a point. Do they count as supernatural elements in this world in which supernatural elements are part of the world?
Yeah.
Are normal ports. I would say yes, because they are unusual over the natural aspects of the world, where powers are an accepted more or less norm. They're not a norm, but norm. They are not. They are common enough to be an accepted part of the world. The Endbringers and people like Nilbog, and some of the Slaughterhouse-9, I think, and other kinds of these sorts of otherworldly sort of threats, and stuff like the Trigger Visions are, I think, supernatural in nature as a what's it called? Not aspect,
element?
Not tool, huh?
Element.
That's close, but that functions. Yeah, element of the text.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Do you want us to define sublime?
Yes. Sorry, I got waylaid. But okay. Yes. So the sublime is this sort of kind of mixture and duality, I think, of intense fear and intense pleasure. Like it like sits together of like this. There's like both like awe and like terror. This kind of this, so much so that it like takes you out of yourself.
Yeah. Like
it's so terrifying. It's so threatening. It like creates so much dread, and like it's something that like completely takes over your body. And we don't really think about astonishment in this sort of like fully encompassing kind of way, but it really is, that this, it just like, it goes, you are beyond your regular emotional capacity.
But it's interesting in my head, which is probably informed by other things, not as accurate to the real meaning.
Yeah.
It's almost more on the, I don't want to say positive side, but more on the like, it's also beautiful, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, it also holds beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is that kind of conversation between those two.
Like looking up at a mountain and feeling vertigo is a kind of sublime feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of just this towering thing that feels like it could collapse on you, even though it won't. And it's a beautiful aspect of nature, but also so much larger. And
nature, I think, comes up a lot when people are kind of trying to, experience the sublime. There was particularly there's this moment in Frankenstein that Victor Frankenstein he's going to go into the woods because he can't handle what's happening. I think this is the moment that like multiple different people have died, and he can't handle it.
Right.
And so he goes out into the woods. He's going to climb this mountain to go into nature to seek, answers or solace or something, right? And he looks up at the mountain, and he feels that sort of like terror and but then also excitement and just because of like the vastness of this, landscape, I guess. Mountainscape, I don't know.
Landscape works.
Yeah. And then as he is doing that, he sees his creation, right? He sees his monster up, like, kind of trudging up, and then like a different sort of like terror overtakes him.
Yeah.
Which, that's a totally different thing that's like, kind of tinged with like guilt and all of this, but and people they don't really like bring up hysteria quite as much with the sublime, but I feel like hysteria
can be a consequence, maybe
well in this context.
Yeah.
Because it's about that kind of, like such an overwhelming experience this mixture of like terror and fear but also like pleasure and like beauty, and it's all really mixed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a little bit of that. Specifically, I wanted to mention Edmund Burke's, because he like his definition of it, because he has this whole essay that he wrote on the sublime, where, well, I mean, it's on the sublime and like the beautiful, all of this like philosophical inquiry into the origin of it. But he's also like talking about taste and kind of what is expected of taste and the like definitional occurrences, I think, of the sublime. He goes down like multiple different things that you could kind of, define as, or like what could cause the sublime, like terror and obscurity and
the sublime is always tinged in some sense by the unknown, and by the feeling of being small. I think.
Like vastness or like infinity. There's one particular line where he's like, infinity has a tendency to fill the mind with that sort of delightful horror, which is the most genuine effect and the truest test of the sublime. So it's this kind of like, I don't know how a material thing to attach to it, but it's this sort of like, you have transcended, kind of the divisions of emotion.
I think if you want to just start, maybe pull some examples from stuff that we've read, and then before we get into Worm's examples, like the ending of the movie Annihilation, I think is tinged with the sublime.
Yes, I would absolutely say that.
House of Leaves, I think the sense of the central narrative. This kind of
the kind
endless,
of like endless space,
endless hallways, endless space.
But I think additionally,
sublime.
The kind of in between narrator who's kind of the editor but not really, the one who's kind of in typeset. His experience where he is being pursued by something that does not exist.
Yeah. Or
perhaps it does exist. I don't know. I haven't finished it, but I assume that it does not. It does not seem that it exists. To me, that seems almost sublime, because it has like the dread and like the terror of it, but it is something that he cannot stop. That he must return to reading this book and editing this book, and I feel like that kind of gets mixed.
And then another example that some people might have listened to is the Magnus Archives has a bunch of examples as well. Stuff regarding vastness and there's several episodes in particular that I'm thinking of, these vast spaces or enormous things that are just the knowledge of their existence fills the heart with terror.
Yes, there was something also. There was another thing that I wanted to. It's kind of like it seems like a factoid or a fact. I don't know, but it kind of places in context the way that everyone is sort of thinking when they're writing Gothic, is that this volcano in Iceland, in 1783 to 1784, like 7 months or 8 months, this volcano erupted for that prolonged period of time, and like cast a literal haze, a like shadowy haze over the continent of Europe, so much so that like Syria could see. Like it was very, very, it changed the skyscape of Europe. It's the whole thing of like with the Scream, that painting is that, I feel like that was painted in this particular moment. Don't quote me because I don't know. That was like a while ago that I learned art history, but that they like it literally like it created a darker physical environment, which kind of cultivated this sort of aesthetic, I guess you could say, of like kind of unknowing and kind of the darkness that that leaves those spaces to kind of be wondered about, which doesn't seem like it's relevant, but in each of the Endbringer scenarios, like each scene that we have of them, and even with Nilbog, sorry, I have to think about it now. They change the landscape of the situation that they're in. Because when you kind of like look at the way that Wildbow, you know, writes about it, the way that the characters talk about these different beings, and the way that Wildbow kind of sets us up to encounter them as readers, I think kind of cultivates that sort of feeling of like intense fear and like beauty. I think that's my argument for the day, is that the Endbringers and Nilbog and Noel, who maybe is attached, who knows, and then also the like flapped beings. I don't know what else to call them. Okay. But
no,
every time that we...
It's good. No, I just the particular adjective of flapping. That's the only...
I really don't know why I have latched on so strongly to that particular action.
It's just a silly sounding word.
It is.
It's so... I wonder how much of this conceptualization of these larger than existence entities is affecting your feeling about them.
I don't know. Perhaps it is impacting it greatly. Who knows?
Who knows?
But I wanted to bring up kind of, you know, the beginning stages of when we see each of them. But also I'll go fast.
Sure.
I didn't put them in order, but
you're good.
So like with Leviathan, I'll put them in order in my head. With Leviathan, we enter into knowing about, we enter into kind of his, like, you know, overtaking, I think, with this very, very, like, tangible, like, memory listing, where Taylor's kind of, like, going in her head when Legend is speaking about, like, the instances that the Leviathan has, you know, which cities, you know, how, like, the devastation that has been created. And so we have this verbal kind of articulation of, you know, what has happened, you know, and what has been the consequence of it. And then, once the Leviathan, you know, appears, is the initial moment is water, right? This, you know, complete overtaking of the entire situation, with water, right? So it totally shifts the way that, the, like, battlefield is set up, and the dynamic and, like, power dynamic, I think, between the Leviathan and everybody else, you know. And then we have this like kind of glimpse of a tall figure, and then a little bit later on, Taylor is like, I can almost make out his face, which is really fascinating, because that happens with the Simurgh too, where we can almost, like, it begins. We
just get a glimpse.
Yeah, there's just a glimpse. Like, we see her, like, physical body, and we kind of go through that, but then, you know, it's like Krauss could make out her face, you know. She has these, like, very specific... It's interesting because each time we encounter them, we see that. Which I feel like...
There's that... Just when the Simurgh's face is described, I think there's something said, like, she looked human, but that made her seem more inhuman.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this... It's like, yeah, it's this almost human, because they could be, but they aren't.
Yeah,
you know. And then with when we enter into the whole scene with Simurgh, there's, like, it begins with stillness, with her sound, right, her scream.
Yeah,
and then it's not stopping. Like, it's, you know, they're kind of trying to figure out everything, and then that's kind of like our beginning anticipatory situation, like, and we see the destruction of. Like, the landscape, and then we see the kind of back and forth between the Simurgh and Scion.
Yeah. It's interesting that his attacks in that fight are pointed out. I mean, his attacks are always silent, but they're reminded we're reminded here that they're silent, as a Seamerg is also silent except for the screaming that is not a tangible reality thing.
Yeah.
So the only sound is just with the destruction of things around them, which almost seems like passive without the sound of the attacks causing that destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's not even like an earthquake sound. It's just buildings collapsing.
Yeah, it's very, the absence makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of like cultivates this, I mean, not really like cottony sort of, but very like papery, I would say, situation. Yeah.
Well, what makes it interesting to me is picturing that like total silence, right? With like, there's also snow, maybe muffling more, and just intermittent, a building crashes and we hear the entirety of that sound. And then we hear, maybe the impact of some laser blasts, and then a pause, and then another crash, right? It's so, it's not a battlefield.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's something else.
Yeah. Thirdly, I wanted to bring up Behemoth, because that was actually the second. When we look at Seamerg, she also, like the way that Weibel writes it. There's the observations of immediately once we get a glimpse, we get the full observations, and it begins with kind of this like we acknowledge her like physical body is big, and then Behemoth is very similar of like we get the physical descriptions and everything, but it's also like very short. It's big, and then it leaves by kind of isolating that, like it leaves that space in the text, not like physical space, but like space in the text for the reader to kind of place our own imagining, kind of in the like Jaws sort of way of like we don't see the shark, we just like know that it's there.
So you're saying that's the same effect, that because it's described the one time and other things are only implied by their effects, by how other things interact with them, that leaves a more mysterious space in our own imaginations.
Yeah. Especially because we kind of, it's not like a interaction, it's an observation of their actions. And a lot of it is we see the effects, which what you were talking about with Seamerg, of like we see the material consequences of their presence, of like this whole landscape being covered by water, or just the buildings collapsing, or like it's
it's interesting that the Seamerg, her event in the Traveler's Arc is covered in snow. She doesn't summon the snow, right? But that is an effect that she has in this environment. Or it's not an effect that she has, but in her portrayal here, it is tied to her, right? She's this white, angelic figure-ish, and then there's this white snow everywhere. And whether or not she's the one creating it doesn't really matter when it's tied to our feelings as a reader, right? So just how Leviathan appears with a bunch of water, and presumably Behemoth with a lot of fire, the Seamerg appears here, even if it's not a direct, consequence of her abilities, with snow.
Yeah, it's
another
like,
environmental factor.
Yeah, it's kind of it kind of reinforces the like social myth of like monsters as primordial, as like connected somehow to nature and somehow to the way that the way that things work when they're here, kind of breaking those rules. As
another with the Seamerg in particular, I think this notion of an otherworldly being is even strong with her. I mean, she lives in space, right? And she doesn't hide in space. She's there. And when she comes down, she's more than angelic. She has these countless wings, right? Wings sprouting upon wings. And, she's so huge and completely, her precognitive abilities make her even more, graceful than she should, right? Especially when combined with telekinesis.
Yeah.
So I think, the phrase even more angelic than angels, except like wrong.
Yeah. It's like unnervingly graceful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's those sorts of things that like that combination of like the beauty of these beings with the destruction that they are causing and like the changing of the physical space, be it through sound or, water or fire with Behemoth.
I believe so. And other kinds of energy.
Yeah.
He's a dynakinetic.
Yeah, because there was one specific instance where they're kind of like looking at him and kind of, trying to figure out what to do, and he like roars.
Mm-hmm. And it smashes all of the soft organs of one person next to Alexandria. Mm-hmm. And then I think he points at someone and they burn from the inside out.
Yeah.
That one especially, the burning from the inside out is just even with sound, theoretically, if you had a strong enough power, you could dampen it. The fire.
Yeah. It's
how? Yeah.
Inescapable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you look at Nilbog, I think there's a different sort of kind of I don't know, he's kind of a variation on the theme because he's not physically monstrous. He's not physically kind of beyond, but he creates monsters upon monsters upon monsters that it's like the iterations of it, I guess, the kind of creation myth that he has created for himself.
Yeah.
And I think...
there's this... Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, there's this sense, as these humans go into this abandoned town of, like, everything living in there has been converted, and it's no longer a place of human residence anymore.
Yeah.
It's now another world, another habitat, an alien environment on Earth in a normal town.
Yeah, and it's like they're walking past like grocery stores, and the landscape hasn't changed, but the kind of feeling of it has.
Yeah.
Which I feel like that sort of defamiliarization makes it into something unknown.
Yeah.
And thereby terrifying, I think.
Yeah. All the different signs of, I don't even know if struggle is the right word, but like the signs of people before, the cars that are parked with their doors open, but no blood anywhere.
Yeah.
There's no description of it anyway. It's like...
Yeah, the entering into the space, I think, kind of exacerbates the whole thing, because we're making the observations just as they are, where it's like no bugs, no blood, all of this. We get the first glimpses of his creations first, and we make the realizations with them. Yeah. Just as like a writing standpoint, it sets it up with that sort of anticipatory dread, that I think kind of feeds into the sublime. Because at the same time, it's like, it's not like beautiful, right? But it's beautiful in the sense of like creation, I think. Of like the monsters kind of creating of themselves. But yeah. And then Noelle is kind of, she doesn't quite fit into it. She definitely fits into the sublime, I think. Even more so, she probably fits more so on the side of like beauty and pain, like beauty and terror.
Okay.
But she's a different sort of monster, because the other ones, they're not necessarily monsters by, well, except maybe Rinky. He's perhaps a monster by choice, but like the other ones are monsters by birth, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she's not even by choice and not by birth either.
See, she's like almost by like a second birth, but like forced. I don't know. It's because she is a monster in physicality only.
Yeah.
I guess we don't know. We haven't really had that much interaction with her, but it seems to be that is the case.
Yeah, I think, if we're talking about sublime, I think being her perspective of just like looking down and seeing your body morph into this grotesque and enormous thing that is completely, seemingly out of your control, at least mostly anyway. Yeah. At the very least, you are not at all in control of how it changes or what it needs. And I don't know if she says it here, but I think there's a point where It says like she tried to like starve herself, right? And then it got too much for her, and then she like ate 40 people or something. And
she's kind of like trying to push herself to the limits that she can't seem to reach.
Well, I think she just wanted to make it stop.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
But yeah,
is that she
the out of controlness nature of your own body morphing into this thing larger than you, I think it definitely has some aspect of the sublime.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then finally, I think absolutely the flapping beings, the trigger events. Because the first one that we see is Miss Militia. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's who I thought. Because at the time I was kind of like, I don't know, but it seemed sublime at the time to me.
Yeah.
When I was first experiencing it, that even like in the description of like it's not big in the sense that the trees or the mountains were big. It was big in the way that transcended what she could even see or feel.
Yeah.
And she's kind of, and immediately after she's kind of forgetting. She can't remember it. That there's this something that's so great, so vast, and then like is seemingly gone, from her mind, or is just kind of like a the aftershock. But
yeah, that reminds me of when Scrub has this trigger event and Taylor sees it, but more specifically, Tattletale's few lines afterwards where her power is still working, but she's already losing the memory. She says something like, they're gods and babies, something else, all at the same time.
Yeah. So I feel like that kind of fulfills this sort of like, not grandiose, because I feel like that's too social a word. Something, some word that's more natural than grandiose.
Yeah.
But, while still being like terrifyingly unknown,
right.
know? Yeah. But, so those are my kind of like lists. I have set this kind of precedent, this kind of precedent conversation so that I can return to horror later. This was kind of like an overarching kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to kind of like return and discuss the kind of intricacies of it in a later episode, I think.
Sure. Was there any other aspect of horror that you wanted to bring out that was not like the same grand sort of sublime, but a different kind?
Yes. I wanted to talk about you called it fridge horror, which I want to know if that is your own term or something that is... No,
it's a TV tropes term.
Okay. I like it. I like that term. But so that kind of like Regent, Cherish, Amy, that kind of body horror, I would say, or like body and mind.
Well, just to clarify to those who don't already know the term, so fridge horror is I think I don't remember who said it, but basically it's the kind of horror where after you walk away from the TV, that's when it hits you. Usually it's used when talking about kinds of horror that are not supposed to be horror, like I don't know, thinking about all the Goombas that Mario has smashed, that kind of thing, or just like the horror of being squished down to a paste, I guess. But usually, something slightly more serious than that. But usually it's a realization of something that is not meant to be horrible, but
set up
upon implication becomes. Yeah. And so some of these things in Worm are not like quite fridge horror, but they're like not a horror that is specifically like called to attention by the narrative. It's by yourself empathizing over the narrative into the characters, reading between the lines of their reactions and stuff.
Yeah. Because a lot of the time we were discussing it of like Taylor doesn't totally articulate her reaction to things, and I think that can, and then so we don't always get the full scope of like the psychological aspects to things, because she thinks very materially, very like practically, and she doesn't always like think about the kind of heady bits that will kind of jiggle it around. And then when we really do kind of get a glimpse of that is when we are in the minds of Regent, of Cherish, and of Amy. And I think because it's almost a necessity, I think, to be in their heads to see this to its full effect. Because we see the intricacies of the way that it's kind of set up and the way that it works, because to just materially watch it happen kind of, outside of either the subject or the instigator action.
Well, you could say victim and, I don't know,
victim
monster.
And monster. I don't think you would get the full scope of it.
Right.
And then we sort of, this is your friture, I suppose, of like, we sort of get the like secondary account, I think, of like the full scale of it, because we see into the victim's mind through the perspective of Regent, of Cherish, of Amy, right? So it's kind of like we're getting like the second copy of something, where it's like it could be clear, but it's not quite, because you did a copy of a copy, and you really only think about it in its entirety when you kind of take a step back. Yeah.
Regent and Cherish, both with their victims, they know what their victims are feeling, and they relay that, but they themselves don't feel it.
Yeah.
And so we're aware of it without having the narration kind of emphasize it.
Yeah, we have to kind of like actively kind of think about the way that it's...
Yeah, especially with Amy and Victoria. Like, externally, Victoria mostly feels violated, it seems, but especially as it escalates and Amy doesn't fix things, it becomes even more and more horrible to just imagine what it's like from her perspective, and yet that as it gets more horrible, we pay attention to Victoria's actual reactions and emotions even less.
Yeah. Which it's a terrifying, avoidance of looking, I think. It's very much, with all of them, it's very much this kind of Richard III, Iago from Othello sort of thing of like, we're kind of stuck with a narrator that we don't totally agree with, but like we can't see the scene from anybody else's standpoint, because they're the ones telling us about it. It's a very interesting position for the reader to be in, I think. Yeah,
of the monster.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this level?
I think that's it on my. I'll just kind of like leave it open for me to return if I should so wish.
And I'm sure that we will. I'm sure that we will.
Yeah.
There's plenty more horror to come. So
yeah.
We are only a little bit less than halfway through the actual book itself. So
okay, yeah. Will this kind of section, the 18 through 22, this next one, will that kind of push us past the halfway point?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, it's book 4. I think we're probably 100,000 words behind, or maybe even just 50,000 from the midpoint.
Oh,
by word
very
count.
Close.
So yes. So, yeah. All right. Okay, so let's do a little bit of an interlude before we get into my section. So here's another game show thing that we have here. It's as a reflection of the one from last week. Rather than "How fucked up is that?" the segment is called "How sweet is this?"
Yeah.
So we have I have a list of sweet moments, and so Clarence, you need to rate them on some sort of scale. You get to decide of how sweet it is. So, of course, the first moment, and I think highly rated here, is when Rachel receives her coat from Taylor.
I'm going to say 12.
12.
Yes.
Damn,
out of 10.
That is a high rating. I don't know what it's out of, but I assume it's a lot.
10. It's out of 10. 12 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a 6 out of 5. If we're gonna reduce the fraction. Okay. Yeah. It's a really wonderful moment, especially just the way that they're both fumbling through the interaction. Yeah. I love it so much.
Them trying to figure it out.
Yes.
It seems like they're getting
Rachel
closer.
Being like.
It seems like they're getting closer to figuring it out. Their friendship. Yeah.
Yeah. Next one, Aisha's protective and threatening little sister talk to Taylor. And probably a little bit less sweet
is
her, I I don't want to say attempted murder of her when she thinks that Taylor has betrayed the team, but
she's very passionate, you know?
She's very passionate. So how sweet is Aisha's protective feelings towards her big brother?
I feel like it's a 7.5.
7.5. Okay, so a bit lower, but still pretty solid. I mean, it shows that she has some genuine good feelings. Yeah,
she's very attached to him, so I feel like that's, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The next moment here is Taylor finally freeing Dinah and saying, "I'm sorry it took so long," and then holding her hand as they exit. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, immediately being teleported and being replaced with a body double. But besides
Before that happened.
Pretty sweet moment, yeah.
I feel like this is a 6.89.
6.89. Yes. So a little bit less than Aisha. Mm-hmm. You know what? I think I might agree.
Because it is sweet, and there's an element of innocence to it, of like a young child, you know, being saved, but it's also like bittersweet, I guess, because you know what took so long, and you know what's gonna happen next. So it's
yes,
you know, it's like if you landed on the edge of a fence, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Next one is keeping Atlas out of harm's way. There's multiple moments. It's not a specific thing where Taylor is specifically trying to take care of Atlas, but there's multiple moments in these arcs where Taylor is specifically not using Atlas because she really doesn't want him to get hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, she also considers it in a practical sense, but even so, we love our big beetle being safe. So
I hope he's over there eating cheeseburgers. But alas, he is not.
Yeah, me too. So how sweet is this?
Well, to me, it is a 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
But I think
damn.
For other people, it perhaps would be like a 5.
A 5.
But I just really love this beetle. And so it is very sweet to me.
I do too. The next one is The Lady Said No. And then Flechette punching a spike into Taylor's shoulder after Flechette perceives Taylor as a threatening Parian.
Yes. This is wonderful. I love this moment a lot.
Mm-hmm. I mean, ow.
I mean,
of
true,
course.
yeah. And then, you know.
But
she was fine.
Still.
She went and used her dentist tools. So I'd say 8.4.
8.4. All right, so even more than Aisha. You know what? I might even agree with that. It certainly is a more effective show of love.
Yeah, I don't know how like much Aisha was planning to like. I mean, she probably could follow through, but it's also like Taylor, who's like kind of her boss.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Worth noting that both Brian and Parian probably didn't want their protective people to actually do what they did.
Yeah, but it's so dramatic, you know? The spike.
It is very dramatic.
The decoration.
Mm-hmm. I want someone to punch a unstoppable force piece of metal into someone's shoulder for me. I think that'd be romantic.
What an idea of romance you have.
It's a parahuman notion of romance. I'm trying to think of another example of romance that I would like from the parahuman universe.
I would like a bug.
Yeah?
Yeah. That would be nice.
Okay, yeah.
One that has like little porcelain, you know, wings. I mean, not real porcelain, but it looks like those little, like, the blue and the, you know, those plates that, you know. Mm-hmm. Actually, I don't know. Those may be like embedded in colonialist history. So maybe not. Never mind.
Well, maybe you can reclaim it or something.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean, this world is very different. I would like a beautiful bone charm necklace from Marquis.
Yeah.
I think he would make it beautiful.
Yeah, well, plus also, like, does he grow his own bones back? Like, if he, like...
I think he can do whatever he wants with his bones, so...
Because I feel like if he can regrow them. It out of his own bones, you know?
Yeah.
That's very, like...
Yeah. And you have a piece of him always with you.
It's like somebody's toe.
Yeah, that romantic gesture that everyone does on Valentine's Day, giving someone your toe. Yeah, that one. Yeah, as you do.
As you do.
Yeah, you give them your pinky toe. That's the love toe.
Or like your molars, you know, your wisdom
teeth. All right,
teeth.
we're going to move on. So the next and final moment I have written down here, of course, there's more. I just couldn't think of them in time. Is that beautiful moment where Marquis knows that Amy needs help and helps her find a way to remember her sister and takes her to get a tattoo, which is not cheap.
No.
5 books and 5 cigarettes.
That's pretty high price.
5 books, yeah, does not seem like a small amount.
That's true. I think for Marquis, I would say it's a 7. But for Amy, I would say it's like a 4.
A 4? Damn.
Well, because with her, she's like, she doesn't understand the total significance of it.
Yeah.
But like with him, he's kind of seemingly forging, he's like having like a father-daughter tattoo moment. Mm-hmm. But with her, she's just kind of like excising this piece of guilt.
Yeah. So from her end, it's more just the effect she's having on her, because from her perspective, it's being provided by someone that she does not have real relations to. It's like a stranger can only be so sweet to you. Yeah. Okay, I think that is what we have for the segment. If you have any other sweet moments you want us to remember from this arc or any arc before, I mean, technically we could have grabbed it from stuff before, but
that's
whatever.
True.
But I don't have the time to think of everything.
Alas.
But if you have a favorite sweet moment from, even this or the next section, go ahead and send us an email and maybe we'll respond to it. All right. So let's get into my essay. So I think mine's going to be a little bit shorter, but that's okay.
Sorry,
so I'm going to be talking about. Say it again.
Oh, I sort of rambled.
No. I appreciate it because mine was already short, so
okay.
it works out. So I'm going to talk about a certain Marxist that was talking about these ideas of dominance and hegemony. So this is Antonio Gramsci. He was an Italian Marxist who was jailed under Mussolini's regime for opposing the state. And he wrote the prison notebooks, which he wrote in prison before he died. Yeah. So Gramsci, Marxists in general, a big question, especially early on, is why don't the oppressed classes, rise up? Why do they view it that the current state of things is in their favor materially? Because, especially at the time, and I would argue now as well, although different solutions are debatable. The oppressed classes, of course, are exploited. I mean, that's how economies work. And yet we view the current state of things as natural and good. So Marx originally, the way that Marx articulated ideology is basically that ideology is something cultivated by the ruling class in order to basically trick or fool the oppressed classes into thinking that things are how they're supposed to be, and that the duty of someone of communists is to lift the veil of the oppressed classes so they can see reality as it really is, which is that they're being oppressed and that the current conditions are not actually beneficial to them, and rise up, right? Except Althusser later on, who wrote after Gramsci and was inspired by him, was arguing about how there is no objective, truth or reality. No matter what you do, you're being influenced by ideology one way or another. So that's where it eventually evolved to. But Gramsci, is writing from under a fascist regime. So that's his perspective. He's writing from there are capitalist regimes where the oppressed classes are not working in the interests, but especially in this fascist regime, which is its entire structure is built so only a privileged few get any benefit. So the way that he understood it was that there's 2 ways that a state rules: dominance and hegemony. So dominance is the state's monopoly on the use of force and the threat of violence, and the knowledge that the state can make you comply, right? This is people in the street that can beat you, the ability to jail you, etc. However, dominance can only go so far before it encounters resistance, right? And I'll go into those with our are worm examples. More important, and what's actually makes the state last, is hegemony or cultural hegemony. So this is the willing consent of the governed to this whatever the oppressive government is. And hegemony is far more complicated than this notion of a, secret cabal of cynical elites that intentionally create an ideology for everyone to follow. Yeah. It is certainly influenced by any such cabals or elites, right? But not so intentionally. It's kind of a negotiation, although a very unfair one. So it's cultivated and encouraged by the classes in control to control the subject classes. And the outcome is that the ruled over classes accept that the current state of things is normal and natural and how things should be, even if such conditions are actually intolerable. Yeah. So like in America, that would be like segregation, right? Yeah. Where there is no reason that this should be how things are, but because they are how things are and the entire culture reinforces that, then it continues to be supportive even if it's actually harmful to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So this is cultivated via a variety of means, most notably like mass media, which doesn't necessarily have to be like, propaganda in the most literal, sense of, posters and whatnot. Of course, that does help. But like just consider something like the Washington Post in real life, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, but not directly, ruled by him, but clearly, the things that are written have to at least be palatable to someone like Jeff Bezos, right? And I mean, it goes on in all aspects. Anytime any kind of media might need some kind of patron to survive, right? That is where the patrons can exercise their influence and promote or diminish any messages that don't promote that kind of hegemony. So it's a natural, like, sort of natural selection of ideas, right? Where the ruling class wants to promote ideas that make it so it's okay for them to be ruling.
Yeah. Where they sort of like embed those. And then they seem as if that is just like commonplace or something that's always been accepted.
Yeah. So creating this cultural hegemony is really important, but also the hegemony can change over time. And when the conditions get so bad that the oppressed classes realize or it comes into conflict with it, when the conditions become so bad that they come into conflict with the hegemony's actual like stated ideas, that is where the oppressed classes rise up and renegotiate the hegemony. Yeah. Sometimes bringing it closer to how it should be, but sometimes not. Sometimes going in a different direction, just so long as they make it in some way palatable and okay.
It's very often that the resistance is sort of redirected or sort of placated.
Yes, I think placation is a good term.
It's like seemingly compromising or seemingly giving out, giving into demands, but at the same time kind of leaving it out to kind of remain slightly at the same sort of status quo.
Yeah. So Gramsci has a lot of other writings involved how basically the struggle against the hegemonic class has to be a unified one, right? Where individual, unions working against specific corporations and such things is effective in the smaller avenue, but not at all in affecting the actual larger culture hegemony. Like those unions are working within the hegemony for the most part. Yeah. And so they have to be unified. But that's not the thing that I'm getting into here. So just to read out another definition from the Concepts of Ideology, Hegemony, and Organic Intellectuals in Gramsci's Marxism. Quote, hegemony is a condition in which a fundamental class exercises a political, intellectual, and moral role of leadership within a hegemonic system cemented by a common worldview or, quote, organic ideology. The exercise of this role on the ethico-political as well as on the economic plane involves execution of a process of intellectual and moral reform through which there is a, quote, transformation of the previous ideological terrain and a, quote, redefinition of hegemonic structures and institutions into a new form. This transformation and redefinition is achieved through a rearticulation of ideological elements into a new worldview, which then serves as a unifying principle for a new, quote, collective will. So basically, this condition is created by the moral, intellectual, and political leaders, right? So that not only includes, actual political, leaders in charge, right? But also, I would say that celebrities are people that people pay attention to exercise this. Moral leaders, as in like religious leaders, also exercise this. Anyone that people look to for how they should be viewing situations is involved in this. And so basically, how revolution needs to happen, according to Gramsci, is basically one of the oppressed classes needs to take control or otherwise influence and become these kinds of leaders so that they can shift the cultural hegemony to make a renegotiation or some sort of revolution possible. And when I'm saying revolution, I don't necessarily mean a violent one. It's any kind of large change of the system. Okay, so let's get into actually Worm, because I think there's a lot of examples in these arcs of rulers. So there's 4 rulers that we're looking at here. We're looking at Cauldron, the PRT, Coil, and of course Taylor. So let's start with Taylor. So Taylor rules her territory. And how did Taylor take control, right? She starts off exclusively with dominance. Mm-hmm. She's exercising her power on all her subjects. And even if she wouldn't actually use it on the people there, although maybe she would, they still feel like they are under threat, right? Just as a state can't actually detain its entire populace, but everyone feels that they are at risk if they, were to fight against it. But for most of the story up to this point, right, she doesn't have total control because she actually lacks that cultural hegemony, and she encounters little resistances constantly, right? Those people complaining or doubting her, like that woman who's the gray-haired woman.
And the father.
And the father, people defying her because they don't believe that it is natural and good for her to be in charge. It's important to note here that Taylor already has that cultural hegemony ideology in her head, right? It's not outside her head. The people don't believe it, but she already believes it, right? And it's just a matter of basically spreading it. So people are complaining because they don't view her rule as in their interests, right? Because they're like, oh, this is just a warlord. She wants to, take things from us. So it's important to note that I'm not making a statement about whether or not she actually is working for the interests, because that's irrelevant. The only thing that's important is whether or not the people believe that.
And they're sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop, I think.
Because the way she's, appearing is not as a legitimate ruler, which the only one to them at that point is probably the United States government, essentially. But she starts establishing cultural hegemony by co-opting the hegemony of the other state, the state that she's, usurping or negotiating in the space of, right? So it starts off at the very beginning, right? When Battery doesn't fight her claim, right? She's legitimized because that's already like a strike against the status quo, right? That they should take her out, but they don't. Therefore,
stay there.
So what's different, right? And then when she fights against the Slaughterhouse 9, she's again legitimized. She's acting like a hero, right? She's co-opting some of that image as a protector. And so she's gaining more respect that way. And I think she basically, at the end of this section, right, with the barbecue, right, she throws the barbecue. So people, again, are like, wow, she's providing, right? And we see at the end of this section, or of that arc, I think arc 15, that they fought against... Actually, I think that was arc 16. The midway of arc 16, that they fought against drones, right? So at that point, that basically represents like a total shift in their perspective of viewing who is the legitimate ruler of the area. because it's not Dragon, right? Dragon is the one messing things up. Dragon is the one ruining the barbecue. Skitter is the one who provided the barbecue. I know I'm placing a lot of emphasis on the barbecue to establish cultural hegemony.
Yeah, but it holds the same amount of power as like a community meeting or something like that, where it's like it cultivates. It's a space that embodies the community, right? And she's the one that has provided it, and so by doing so, she's kind of attached herself to this, right? And I think Dragon becomes an interloper instead of a protector when her suit kind of like starts taking it down. Yeah.
Another outside the Worm example would be like the cultural hegemony would be exercised in like people holding an election, right? So it seems like, everything's fair. Anyone could be, ruler, but always a particular class is selected, right? The intellectual class or whatever. Every single time, there might be some legitimate arguments, but there's also legitimate arguments against it, right? The cultural hegemony of, the intellectual class over an entire blue collar class is that you can't govern yourselves, you need us, right? Yeah. Which nuanced understanding there, but it's not always in their interest, and there's plenty of other angles you could consider that in. So it's not until Taylor encounters people outside her territory that she witnesses what people not under her hegemony believe, right? Yeah, her argument with Perrin and Flechette, which is a little bit different because they're part of the same sort of class, but in different, environments as parahumans. But the other main example, of course, is with her father's friends, right? Who they have not been influenced by her hegemony. They have not been under her rule. And this is kind of back to square one. Like, I'm sure some people on her territory feel that way, but I don't think they feel it the same way that they do.
Yeah, they have a different perspective from inside the community, I guess, but kind of like a miniature state versus like outside of it.
Yeah. And so Taylor, who believes in her own hegemony, right? She's the same ideology that she's trying to express to the people in her territory, is viewing her rule as natural and good. Yeah. And the people outside of it see it as unnatural and bad. Yeah. So this is often the case in real life. There usually isn't, right, that shadow cabal pulling the strings and cynically deciding what should and shouldn't be part of the nation's ideology. It's just people reinforcing it through action. So this sort of co-opting of the existing culture hegemony, right, happens multiple times through these other examples. So Taylor does it with the local PRT, right? She's saying, I can govern better than they can. I will protect you like the heroes are supposed to. Coyle as well, right? He deletes his villain identity in favor of being PRT director. That's a little bit different because, they don't know that he's a villain, but...
it's kind of a duality there, I guess.
Yeah, he's putting on the clothing of someone else. Although another thing to note is that, he'd be kind of functionally the ruler of the area, but he's not democratically elected. So that's a little iffy. But the another example, of course, is Alexandria and Cauldron creating the Triumvirate, who and the PRT, the Protectorate, who make this show of bending the knee to United States government while they're actually not doing so at all because people wouldn't accept their rule otherwise, right? If Eidolon and Legend and Alexandria wanted to use their dominance to take over, the United States, they wouldn't have the hegemony at all to do it. And no one would accept their rule except for, being under direct threat.
Yeah, they've kind of like cultivated an image of themselves in order to kind of ingratiate, I think. Yeah. But I don't know how effective it is. Like, do we know how, like, the, like, regular people's view of the PRT?
We don't, but I don't think we see anything. I think at the very most, people think maybe it's, like, corrupt or ineffective or something like that. But I'm certain that there isn't, like, a sentiment that this thing should not exist. Yeah. It's another part of just the world, of the government. So actually, let's get into the PRT, right? So the PRT is technically under the control of Cauldron. I think that's less significant in this example, right? But we see from multiple perspectives, not necessarily just in these arcs, but in the arcs before as well, of how the PRT is intentionally spreading and altering the public perception of heroes to suit their own ends, right? Of creating the expectation that heroes should be around. I think, I'm not sure if I remember, but there's probably stuff about, having certain, heroes as movie stars and things like that, just to make it normal. And I mean, at the very least, right, in Weld's interlude, right, he shows up and Pigot talks about how there is an initiative in the PRT, right, to make him more, and in other case 53 is more palatable, right, make it more normal.
Yeah, there's very intentional cultivation.
Mm-hmm. If you see the PRT, which is very complicated to try to view class in this way, but if you view the PRT with capes included, with heroes included as a hegemonic class, which I mean they kind of are.
I can see that.
Is I mean it's a little bit complicated because there's multiple kinds of people in there. Or, maybe we could just view them as hegemonic classes. They are spreading this ideology that we should be in charge because we are good, we are heroes. Heroes save people. Heroes protect the community. Give us your tax dollars, etc.
Yeah.
I want to point out real quick also that like the PRT troopers are not just policemen, right? They are actually like paramilitary, basically. They are not military, but we see in Nilbog's interlude that they are like heavily armed.
They seem to be, the men in armor, sort of, with the dashes in between, with like prepared to fight whatever.
Yeah, and like I mean, if we had that in our current government, which I mean, kind of a little bit, I mean, there's a reaction against that, right? Of like your everyday, law enforcement person should not be outfitted like the SWAT teams all the time, right? But the PRT kind of are sort of in that way, and yet because of this strong, kind of, if not propaganda, the influencing of the norm, and because they style themselves as police officers, right, as just another arm of the law, their existence becomes also accepted and normal.
Because they're sort of they're sort of like sold as like protectors, right, of a threat that people can't face on their own, and so they've been created as this sort of like in between this barrier, but something in between a barrier. What is that? What is that term? Buffer. A buffer. Yeah, a buffer that is meant to protect and kind of prevent. But then at the same time, it's like that concept has been naturalized because of the presence of parahumans and what the PRT has said.
Yeah. It's a very complicated nature of a rule there, because so we have truly the parahumans are in charge, right? Alexandria is actually in charge of both the triumvirate and the protectorate and the PRT, right, in her alter ego. However, to most people, it looks like the humans are in charge of the parahumans, right? Yeah. So we have this kind of multi-layered thing. And of course, we see so much of the PRT's role is just public perception, right? They talk about, branding and cape names and figurines and toy lines and lunch boxes. Yeah,
there's a lot
underwear.
There's a lot of like material, reinforcement of it.
Right. Yeah. The heroes are just deployed basically just as a show sometimes, right? Shadowstalker at the mall and during Bakuda's bombing. Yeah. But okay, so that's what I have for this one. Of course, there's more examples of cultural hegemony and its implications, but that is what we're going to talk about this time. I'll probably bring up the subject again. Also, I just want to mention this is a tangent. This is just talking about the perspective section in general. I'm kind of running out of theorists to talk about. So I just want to say that because so. Obviously, there's actually like a lot of people to talk about, but we've summarized a lot of the
big
concepts.
ones, yeah.
Yeah, and part of the problem is that a lot of the even larger literary movements it's kind of hard to talk about here with Worm, and as this purpose of like exploring new ways of using literary theory, because like formalism, we kind of already used that, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to do something like bring in a particular concept like the sublime to make it not just talking about what we already accept as natural. Structuralism is already a mess. I've explained why I don't want to do that one.
Yeah.
Post-structuralism is possible, but of course I've already done that a bit. Post-colonialism is, Clarence and I are both white.
Yeah.
Wildbow's white. I don't feel it's really like, and it also takes place in America. Not that makes it, not able to be viewed through post-colonial. I mean, America's a colony and an empire, but it makes it. I don't feel comfortable enough to do that myself without doing a lot more reading.
Yeah.
And then I don't psychoanalytic perspectives. I don't like either because they focus a lot on Freud.
I found some that were beyond or outside of Freud. Not outside,
okay.
but like
have those
kind of sit in different spaces that are still sort of psychoanalysis that I think I'm going to explore, because I really want to talk about Taylor and self-image. It's been on my list.
Then that would be good. All right. I haven't looked that much beyond the psychoanalysis stuff that's not Freud, because that's the one that shows up in the textbooks a lot, because they were written
although that
when
one kind
Freud
of
was much more
overlaps
accepted.
with like some like second and third wave like feminist thought, I think. So
that is the other one that we can do a lot in.
That one's definitely that's also been on my list that I haven't kind of pulled from as much, but I have this kind of like list of people that I want to talk about. Yeah.
I mean, feminist theory just talks a lot about just the body and the mind, so I think it's very, very useful. Yes. And then, of course, Marxism, again, it's pretty useful and not too difficult to talk about, but of course, there's only so many angles I can take before it's like, okay, there's classes and worm, we get it. Yeah. So, but all right. I'm not entirely sure what I mean by this. It's just saying that I'm not running out of ideas, but it's definitely getting more difficult to think of as something unique.
We may return to particular theories or theorists from like a different angle,
Yeah.
Like on like David, if you're working on his hand, maybe now we're working on like his chin or something.
Yeah. But okay, that is what we have for perspectives this week. So we're going to finish off by talking about just our favorite powers from this arc before we close out. Yeah. So Clarence, what were your favorite powers this time?
So I had a couple of them. First, Barker, and I feel like I mentioned this last podcast, but like it's just it just made me so terribly happy, and also I would kind of want that to like mostly because mostly because in my mind, there's like this sweet moment between like Rachel and Taylor, and Rachel's like, I know you're gonna have a plan, like I was counting on you arriving and you have this whole thing, like I totally believe in you, and he's like in the background like cursing is what I am imagining.
Just in the background, just like fuck.
Yeah, it's just it's a very amusing image, and it makes me happy.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah, and then the second one is I forgot how to say her name, but it's the
Glastig-Wenier.
Glastig-Wenier. Yes.
I'm sure there's a better way to pronounce it, but that's the way that I do anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, in your expert opinion of pronunciation, there you go. Glastig-Wenier. And, all of these, like, extra passengers that she seems to cart around. Maybe. I don't know. It seems intriguing. And I kind of like her aura. Yeah. Neither of them were really, like, power-focused, I think. It was mostly the particular individuals, and their powers were kind of like a aside. But I like them. Yeah.
Yes.
What about you?
So I have two, and they're both shapeshifters. I'm going to talk about Marquis again. There's a particular moment during that fight where he mutates his foot into this kind of ripple of bone, and that was just fascinating to me. it's just that it's not just like spears and stuff of bone. Like he actually like his entire foot turns into a weapon essentially, and it like charges forth. And that's fascinating. The image to me is very visceral is not the term, but like I don't know, it feels very physical to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like a tuning fork. And then I don't know. I
feel
like I felt it in my bones when I was reading his whole thing. You know. Yeah. Yes. For me, it was like hardening clay. That's what it like. Yeah. Something that was wet just suddenly becoming solid, and then it's like a hard, crumbly kind of. Anyway, and then the other one was Genesis, of course, because it's just a fascinating thing that just like visualizing something and it comes to That's so much
life.
Creative power.
Yeah, and the fact that you become you rest by being awake. That's really cool. Okay, that is what we have for favorite powers. We're going to go over our themes and theories. So Sarah Penguin did an absolutely like wonderful and thorough. I don't know if essay is quite the right term, but basically they looked at capitalism, class, and the monetization of powers, as well as various different just aspects of setting and character and organization in these arcs of Worm, looking at the city and then how it is post-Leviathan, how powers are monetized, not just like the cauldron way, but in how like capes are monetized, right? The defiant, being monetized in underwear and things like that, and what are some effects like that from that, and then continuing on to how parahumans might fit as classes, and there's a lot. Sarah Penguin does a lot. Yeah. Yes, it's truly wonderful. So if you, I highly recommend people read that and take a look. There's just a lot to gain from it. Their comment is under Decomposing Worm, episode 4, perspectives on arcs 9 through 14. So yeah, please check that out. It's just a fascinating run through of so many aspects. I really enjoyed it, Sarah Penguin. Thank you for writing it up, and I'm hoping to pull from it in future discussions of class and powers in Worm. I think it's really useful.
Yeah, it's very like Watershed, where it's kind of like it has the central idea.
Yeah,
it has
it's
like
a lot
of different kind of fully thought out iterations. Yeah,
a lot of stuff coming together, I think. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we're gonna rush through here a little bit. So that is what we have for the content this week. So just to inform you guys on what else is going on in Doof Media right now, I know I talk about it every week, but I'm very, very excited about it. The FTL Game Club, Faster Than Light Game Club, is next week on July the 4th. That is next Saturday, not the Saturday that we're recording, or the Saturday that just passed, because this is coming out a day late on Sunday. But I'm very, very excited about that. If you haven't played FTL, go just buy it. It should be pretty cheap. I think max is $15, and it's usually on sale. And it's a really, really, really good game. So, highly, highly recommend. And next week, Doofcast is the Doofcast is covering Psycho-Pass, which is an anime that I've heard is pretty good. So this is the first season of that anime. So if you enjoyed that, maybe go check out that episode, and hopefully it'll have someone that doesn't hate anime on it, which I think we will be able to wrangle. So that's always an improvement. Yeah. I love hearing Scott and Matt talk about everything. It's just helpful to have someone there to tell them to call out some of the good stuff that they don't notice, because they're not aficionados. Do you like anime, Clarence?
I don't dismiss anything at face value, but I'm not. I haven't watched a lot of it.
Okay.
I mean, I will watch it if other people watch it with me, but I won't seek it out by myself.
I'm gonna watch Howl's Moving Castle with you, because I actually never finished it. I think I have the DVD. It's not mine though. So when you're in the area, come over and we will we will watch it, because I think you would very much enjoy the aesthetic.
I think I would.
So.
I really like. I've seen a lot of the animation. I just haven't seen anything in its entirety. Also, if you like what we do here at Doof Media, also consider donating maybe a single $1 per month or whatever else you can afford. It's due to the generosity of our patrons that we're able to create shows like this. You know, patron dollars are what pay hosting fees and how we're able to like purchase a microphone and different materials, recording materials, or like different sorts of things for us.
As well as do other little events, like the fan art contest, which I don't remember when the next one is, but
keep an eye out.
The fan art contest. You can go to patreon.com/doofmedia and see all the great patron rewards we have. The one that we should mention this week, of course, is the $5 level, the Doof Dancer level, because at that level you get access to our Doofin chills, which Clarence and I just were on the last one. So yeah, so if you join at the $5 level, you get to watch a like an hour and a half to a 2 hour conversation with me and Clarence and Scott and Matt, as we just we ended up talking about Worm a lot, but it was supposed to be about all sorts of things.
It was a good sort of
yes.
It was moving.
It was moving, yes. Which I really enjoyed. It was a good time. Fun. And of course, you get access to every single other Doof and Chill that's ever happened before, and there's been a lot of cool ones. I think the last one, we played Left 4 Dead, and Scott and I were really good at it. Matt and Brian put on a good show.
Oh.
So, but that was a really good time too. And there's plenty of other ones as well. After you read Pact, Clarence, which you will do at some point, there was one where they used an AI text generator to basically go through a Pact sort of world dungeon thing. It was a lot of fun. So
that sounds fun.
Yes. And of course, if you don't have the money to support us, there's plenty of other ways to do so. You can just tell a friend. You can just put your phone connected to your speakers and play it as loud as possible out your window and hope that someone hears the title.
Hear it.
And yeah, exactly. And there's plenty of other things to do. And of course, please consider donating to Wildbow, because he is the one that makes this all possible.
Yeah, and we have such like a unique experience with Worm and like with all of these web stories to like be able to interact with Wildbow. Like that's so cool to like be able to like have a conversation.
It is very, very cool.
And like, I don't know, it's really I just said a unique experience, but like it's really it makes the world, I think, a lot. It remains like a living object, a living text.
Yeah, and yeah, Webbo just does so much. I keep pausing on Pale because I'm binging Worm, but man, I'm loving that so much. I should also mention Wildbow, as of I think last night, wrote a entry in Do the Right Thing. So
cool.
So he wrote basically, he says, considering it a sort of teaser. I haven't read it yet. I haven't had the time to, but I understand that it's a sci-fi sort of world that it is now built out very much so. So if you want to go read that, you can go to / do the right thing, and then in the thread for episode 64, suppress bad. Episode 64, Suppress Bad East End Goalkeeper. You can read his entry.
What interesting words you have.
And you can read my story there as well. But okay, that is all we have for y'all this week.
Next week will be our overview episode, so we'll be reading arcs 18 through 22. And so we'll start taking questions for the questions for Clarence and like the themes and theories, all of that, in the Reddit thread. Yes. Yeah.
Which is on Parahumans, of course, and it should be linked in the description among other places. You could send us your questions for Clarence and your themes and theories for that section. Also, we'd love to just hear what you guys thought of this episode.
We like it when we hear back from you.
You can also send us an email at decomposing decomposingpodcast@gmail.com, or, I don't know, tweet at us or send us a DM at our Twitter, at decomposingpod.
Haha.
So that's all we have for y'all this week. Next week we have our overview episode.
We'll be returning to the rhythm of reading.
Covering arcs 18 Queen through 22 Cell.